Money can buy you anything. A mansion overlooking the city. Private jets. Silence when you need it most. But here's what it can't buy: protection from the truth. On a cold March evening in Beverly Hills, 2 bodies were discovered inside one of the most expensive homes in California. A Dubai Sheikh. His secret lover. Both dead. Both shot. And here's where it gets strange: no forced entry. No robbery. No obvious motive. But what if I told you this wasn't just a crime of passion? What if the real killer wasn't even in the room when the triggers were pulled? Have you ever trusted someone completely, only to realize they were playing a different game all along? Have you ever wondered what happens behind the closed doors of the ultra-wealthy, the secrets they guard, the lives they hide? This is the story of Sheikh Hamdan al-Nahri and Layla Yusuf. On the surface, their deaths looked like a tragic love affair gone wrong. But when detectives started digging, they found encrypted files, fake passports, and a global smuggling operation worth millions. They found evidence of sedation, staged crime scenes, and a phantom figure who vanished into the night. The police didn't just solve a double homicide. They exposed an international conspiracy that reached from the art galleries of Dubai to the power corridors of royalty. So here's my question for you: are you ready to hear what really happened inside that mansion? Because once you know the truth, you can't unsee it. Before we go any further, let me ask you something. If you're someone who values real stories, stories that don't sugarcoat the darkness of this world, then do yourself a favor and hit that subscribe button right now. Because channels like this, that bring you the uncomfortable truths others won't touch, need your support to survive. And if you're not going to subscribe, I genuinely want to know, why not? Drop a comment and tell me. Let's talk about it. Now, let's step into the world of Sheikh Hamdan al-Nahri, a man who had everything, and lost it all in one night. Sheikh Hamdan al-Nahri wasn't just wealthy. He was generationally rich. Born into one of Dubai's most influential families, he grew up surrounded by power, prestige, and privilege that most people can't even comprehend. His family's name opened doors across the Middle East. Business deals. Political connections. Charitable foundations that made headlines. To the outside world, Sheikh Hamdan was the model of success. He ran multiple enterprises, real estate developments in Dubai, investments in European tech startups, and a philanthropic organization that funded schools across North Africa. His face appeared in business magazines. He attended global summits. He shook hands with presidents and CEOs. But there was another side to Sheikh Hamdan. A side he kept carefully hidden from the Dubai elite and his family back home. In Beverly Hills, tucked away in a gated community where privacy was currency, stood his American sanctuary. A sprawling mansion with marble floors, floor-to-ceiling windows, and a view that stretched across Los Angeles. It wasn't just a vacation home. It was a second life. And in that second life lived Layla Yusuf. Layla was 28 years old, strikingly beautiful, and impossibly charming. She came from Casablanca, Morocco, a city of contrasts, where ancient Medinas meet modern wealth. But Layla didn't grow up in the wealthy parts. She grew up watching the rich from a distance, dreaming of a life beyond survival. 3 years before her death, Layla attended an art gala in Dubai. She wasn't supposed to be there. She'd talked her way into the event through a connection in the city's underground art scene. That's where she met Sheikh Hamdan. He was captivated. She was magnetic, confident, and unlike the women in his usual circles. She spoke 5 languages. She knew art, history, and how to read people. Within months, she was traveling between Morocco, Dubai, and the United States. Always discreetly. Always in the shadows. To his family, Layla didn't exist. To his business partners, she was just another acquaintance. But inside that Beverly Hills mansion, she was his partner, his confidant, and eventually, his co-conspirator. For over a year, they lived together in that house. No one knew. Not his wife back in Dubai. Not his children. Not even his closest advisors. The mansion became their private kingdom, insulated from judgment and consequence. But kingdoms built on secrets don't last. In the months leading up to their deaths, people close to Sheikh Hamdan noticed changes. He became paranoid. Jumpy. He'd check his phone obsessively, looking over his shoulder in public. Friends said he seemed distracted, even fearful. Layla, on the other hand, was pushing him. Urging him to cut ties with Dubai. To start fresh in America. To leave behind the weight of his family name and the expectations that came with it. She wanted freedom. He wanted escape. But neither of them realized they were already trapped. Here's the thing about living a double life, it only works as long as no one's watching. And someone was always watching. If you're still here, it means you're hooked. Good. Because what comes next is going to challenge everything you thought you knew about this case. But here's the deal, if you're not engaging with this content, if you're just passively watching, you're part of the problem. Hit that like button. Share this video. Comment your thoughts. Because the algorithm buries stories like this unless you fight for them. So fight for the truth. Let's keep going. March 14th. A Thursday. The kind of night where the air feels heavy, like the world is holding its breath. At 9:47 p.m., the alarm system at Sheikh Hamdan's Beverly Hills mansion triggered. The security company immediately flagged it. Within minutes, neighbors called 911, reporting loud noises, shouting, something crashing, and then, unmistakably, a gunshot. Police arrived at 10:03 p.m. The front gate was locked. No signs of forced entry. The mansion looked untouched from the outside, pristine, quiet, almost peaceful. But inside, it was a different story. Officers entered through the main door, which had been left unlocked. The foyer was immaculate. No signs of struggle. No overturned furniture. No broken glass. Everything in its place. They moved through the house, calling out, weapons drawn. The silence was oppressive. Then they reached the master bedroom. Sheikh Hamdan al-Nahri lay on the floor near the bed, a gunshot wound to his chest. Blood had pooled beneath him, soaking into the expensive Persian rug. His eyes were open, staring at nothing. A few feet away, near the window, was Layla Yusuf. She'd been shot in the head. The weapon, a small-caliber pistol, was on the floor beside her. 2 people. 2 gunshots. 2 lives ended in a room that should have been a sanctuary. Detective Marcus Alvarez arrived shortly after. He'd been with the LAPD for 22 years, working everything from gang violence to white-collar crime. But this scene didn't fit any of his usual patterns. No forced entry. No robbery. The safe in the closet was untouched, still holding cash and jewelry worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. The security system had been armed, then disarmed, then armed again, all within a span of minutes. And then there was the footage. The mansion had 12 security cameras covering every angle, front gate, driveway, entrances, hallways. But when Alvarez reviewed the footage, he found a gap. 40 minutes. From 9:07 p.m. to 9:47 p.m., the cameras showed nothing. Just black screens. Someone had tampered with the system. Or disabled it. Or knew exactly how to create a blind spot. Alvarez walked the scene again, this time more slowly. He studied the bodies. Sheikh Hamdan's wound suggested he'd been shot from close range, but there were no powder burns on his clothing. Layla's wound was clean, precise, almost execution style. The positioning bothered him. Sheikh Hamdan had fallen backward, as if he'd been standing when shot. But Layla was near the window, facing away from the door. Why would she turn her back if there was a threat? And then there were the guns. A 9mm pistol registered to Sheikh Hamdan was found near his body. The smaller pistol near Layla wasn't registered to anyone. On the surface, it looked like a murder-suicide. A lover's quarrel that escalated. Maybe she shot him, then herself. Or maybe he shot her, then turned the gun on himself. But Alvarez didn't buy it. Not yet. Because there was something else. Something he couldn't quite name. The scene felt too clean. Too staged. Like someone had arranged it to look like something it wasn't. He stepped back, taking in the entire room. The bed was made. The curtains were drawn. A bottle of wine sat on the nightstand, 2 glasses beside it. Both half full. It looked like they'd been having a quiet evening. And then, in an instant, everything ended. But how? And more importantly, why? Detective Alvarez knew that understanding the victims was the key to understanding the crime. So he started digging. And what he found was a web of secrets, lies, and desperation. The first interviews painted a troubling picture. Sheikh Hamdan's business associates in Los Angeles described him as increasingly erratic over the past 6 months. He'd missed meetings. Cancelled deals. One associate said Hamdan had called him late at night, rambling about pressure from home and needing to disappear. When Alvarez reached out to contacts in Dubai, the story got murkier. Sheikh Hamdan's marriage was a disaster. His wife, from another prominent family, had reportedly filed for separation twice, only to withdraw both times under pressure from relatives. There were rumors of infidelities, multiple affairs, secret relationships, a lifestyle that clashed with his public image. Financially, things were even stranger. Forensic accountants brought in by the LAPD traced millions of dollars moving through offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands, Switzerland, and Singapore. Money was being funneled out of Hamdan's legitimate businesses into accounts with no clear purpose. Where was it going? And why? Then there was Layla. On the surface, she seemed like a woman who'd gotten lucky, escaping poverty, finding a wealthy benefactor, living a life of luxury. But the deeper Alvarez dug, the more complex she became. Layla wasn't just Hamdan's mistress. She was connected. Deeply connected. Interpol had a file on her. Nothing criminal, but she'd been flagged multiple times crossing borders with high-value items, art, antiquities, sculptures. Always declared. Always legal. But the frequency raised eyebrows. Alvarez spoke to contacts in Morocco who knew Layla before she met Hamdan. They described her as ambitious, cunning, and deeply embedded in Casablanca's underground art world. She knew dealers, smugglers, and collectors who operated in the gray areas of legality. One former associate said something that stuck with Alvarez: Layla didn't just want money. She wanted power. She wanted to be untouchable. So here's what Alvarez pieced together: Layla and Hamdan weren't just lovers. They were partners in something bigger. Something that required secrecy, offshore accounts, and connections across continents. But what? The answer came when Alvarez's team searched the mansion more thoroughly. In Hamdan's private study, a room Layla reportedly never entered according to household staff, they found a locked cabinet. Inside were 3 encrypted laptops, a folder of fake passports with Hamdan's photo under different names, and a leather-bound ledger. The ledger was the key. It detailed transactions dating back 4 years. Artifacts purchased in the Middle East, ancient pottery, stolen manuscripts, bronze sculptures from archaeological sites. These items were then moved through a network of dealers, ending up in private collections across Europe and the United States. The operation was worth millions. And Layla was listed repeatedly as a facilitator. She wasn't just living off Hamdan's wealth. She was actively running part of the smuggling network, using her Western connections and charm to move illegal goods across borders. Alvarez sat back, stunned. This wasn't a love story gone wrong. This was a criminal enterprise. And both victims were neck-deep in it. But if they were partners, why would they kill each other? That's when Alvarez found the emails. Buried in one of the encrypted laptops was a correspondence between Hamden and an unknown contact, identified only as MS. The emails were vague, but the tone was clear. Hamden was trying to negotiate an exit. He wanted out of the smuggling operation. He was willing to cooperate with authorities in exchange for immunity. He was going to become a whistleblower. And if Hamden talked, Layla's entire network would collapse. She'd lose everything: her freedom, her connections, her power. Suddenly, a motive emerged. But here's where it gets complicated. Because the evidence didn't fully support a murder-suicide. And Alvarez was about to discover why. You're halfway through this story, and if your mind is racing with theories, good. That means you're paying attention. But here's the reality: most people will watch this video, get to this point, and move on without engaging. Don't be that person. Drop a comment right now with your theory. Who do you think killed them? Was it Layla? Was it Hamden? Or was it someone else entirely? And if you haven't subscribed yet, ask yourself why. What's stopping you from supporting content that actually makes you think? Let's keep this investigation going. Now, let's talk about the evidence that changed everything. Detective Alvarez thought he had the case figured out. A smuggling operation. A betrayal. A confrontation that turned deadly. It made sense. It fit the evidence. But then the toxicology reports came back. Both Sheikh Hamden and Layla Yusuf had traces of a sedative in their bloodstreams, a powerful benzodiazepine that wasn't prescribed to either of them. The levels weren't high enough to render them unconscious, but they would have caused disorientation, slowed reflexes, and impaired judgment. They'd been drugged. Alvarez felt his theory crumble. If both victims were sedated, how did they shoot each other? And more importantly, who drugged them? He went back to the scene, this time with a forensic team focused on toxins and trace evidence. They tested everything: the wine glasses, the bottle, the food in the kitchen. The wine came back positive. Both glasses contained the sedative. Someone had poisoned their drinks. Someone who had access to the house. Someone who wanted them incapacitated. Alvarez reviewed the security footage again, this time focusing on the days leading up to the murder. He watched hours of recordings, deliveries, visitors, staff coming and going. And then he saw it. 3 days before the murders, a black SUV appeared on the street outside the mansion. It drove past slowly, then circled back. The windows were tinted. The license plate was obscured. The next day, the same SUV. This time it parked 2 houses down for 20 minutes, then left. The day before the murders, it appeared again. And this time, Alvarez noticed something: the vehicle's movements were deliberate. Calculated. Whoever was driving knew the neighborhood, the security patterns, the blind spots. Alvarez pulled footage from neighboring homes. One camera caught a partial plate. He ran it through the system. The vehicle was registered to a shell company based in Nevada. The company had no employees, no office, no legitimate business. It was a front. But for what? Alvarez dug deeper. The shell company had ties to international security firms, the kind that provided discreet services for high-net-worth clients. Bodyguards. Fixers. People who made problems disappear. And that's when Alvarez found the name, Kareem Saleh. Kareem was a ghost. No social media. No public records. But in certain circles, criminal investigators, intelligence agencies, journalists covering organized crime, his name came up. He was known as a fixer. A middleman. Someone who handled situations too sensitive for normal channels. If a billionaire needed a scandal buried, they called Kareem. If a politician needed evidence to vanish, they called Karim. And if a royal family needed to silence a whistleblower, they called Karim. Alvarez's blood ran cold. This wasn't a murder-suicide. This wasn't even a crime of passion. This was an assassination. A professional hit, staged to look like something else. Karim had been hired to eliminate Sheikh Hamdan and Layla before they could expose the smuggling network and the powerful people behind it. He'd surveilled the mansion, learned their routines, and executed the plan with precision. He'd drugged their wine, waited for the sedative to take effect, then entered the house during the 40-minute window when the cameras were disabled. He'd shot them both, arranged the scene to suggest a murder-suicide, and disappeared into the night. Clean. Efficient. Untraceable. Except he'd made one mistake. He'd left the sedative in their systems. And that single detail unraveled the entire cover-up. Alvarez issued a warrant for Karim Saleh. But by the time authorities moved, Karim was gone. Out of the country. Vanished into the network of safe houses and fake identities he'd built over decades. The case was solved, but justice remained out of reach. And the people who'd hired Karim? They stayed in the shadows, protected by wealth, power, and plausible deniability. Before the toxicology reports changed everything, Detective Alvarez had constructed a different narrative. And understanding that narrative is crucial, because it reveals just how carefully this crime was orchestrated to deceive investigators. Alvarez's initial theory went like this. Sheikh Hamdan had grown increasingly desperate. The smuggling operation was closing in on him. Authorities in multiple countries were asking questions. His family in Dubai was pressuring him to return. His marriage was collapsing. And worst of all, he knew that if the truth came out, he'd lose everything, his reputation, his freedom, possibly his life. So he made a decision. He would cooperate with U.S. authorities. He would turn over evidence of the smuggling network in exchange for immunity and protection. It was a calculated gamble. If it worked, he could start over. New identity. New life. Freedom from the weight of his family name. But there was one problem, Layla. If Hamdan became a whistleblower, Layla's entire operation would collapse. She'd built her power and influence through the smuggling network. She'd cultivated relationships with dealers, collectors, and criminals across 3 continents. Losing that network meant losing everything she'd worked for. When Hamdan told her his plan, or when she discovered it, she confronted him. Alvarez imagined the scene, a heated argument in the master bedroom. Accusations. Betrayal. Hamdan insisting he had no choice. Layla refusing to let him destroy her life. The argument escalated. Hamdan reached for his gun, perhaps to threaten her, perhaps to defend himself. Layla had her own weapon, a small pistol she'd carried for protection in her dealings with dangerous people. Shots fired. Hamdan fell first, struck in the chest. Layla, realizing what she'd done and knowing there was no escape, turned the gun on herself. Murder-suicide. A tragic end to a doomed relationship. The ballistic evidence supported this theory, initially. Hamdan's 9mm pistol had been fired once. Layla's smaller caliber weapon had also been fired once. Gunshot residue was found on both bodies. But then came the inconsistencies. The angle of Hamdan's wound didn't match a shot fired by Layla from her position. The lack of powder burn suggested the gun was fired from farther away than the scene indicated. And Layla's wound, clean, precise, execution style, didn't fit the profile of a self-inflicted gunshot by someone in emotional distress. Suicide victims who shoot themselves in the head typically show hesitation marks, awkward angles, or multiple attempts. Layla's wound was too perfect. Too professional. And then the toxicology reports arrived, and the entire theory collapsed. Both victims had been sedated. Their reflexes would have been impaired. Their judgment clouded. Even if they'd wanted to shoot each other, their physical ability to do so accurately was compromised. Someone else had been in that room. Someone who drugged them, waited for the sedative to take effect, and then executed them both. The murder-suicide theory wasn't just wrong. It was exactly what the killer wanted investigators to believe. And that realization changed everything. Alvarez understood now that he was dealing with a professional. Someone who knew how to stage a crime scene. Someone who understood forensics, police procedures, and how to manipulate evidence. This wasn't a crime of passion. This was a calculated execution. And the person responsible was still out there. If you're still watching, you're in the minority. Most people have already clicked away, moved on to the next distraction. But you're here because you care about the truth. So let me ask you, are you going to support this kind of content, or just consume it and disappear? Hit that subscribe button. Share this video with someone who needs to hear this story. And comment below, did you see this twist coming? Because what happens next is even more chilling. Let's talk about the man who orchestrated it all. Kareem Saleh wasn't supposed to exist. At least, not in any official capacity. No birth certificate in international databases. No passport records that could be verified. No employment history. No tax returns. He was a phantom, a name whispered in the corridors of power when problems needed solving and questions needed to remain unasked. But Detective Alvarez had a name, and that was enough to start pulling threads. Through Interpol contacts and intelligence agencies, Alvarez pieced together a profile. Kareem had been born in Lebanon, possibly in the 1970s. He'd served in military or paramilitary units during the Civil War. After the conflict, he'd disappeared into the private security world, working for contractors in Iraq, Afghanistan, and across North Africa. Somewhere along the way, he'd transitioned from security to problem-solving. He became the person wealthy clients called when legal solutions weren't an option. Scandals buried. Witnesses silenced. Evidence destroyed. His client list, according to intelligence sources, included oligarchs, politicians, and yes, members of royal families. Alvarez obtained surveillance footage from businesses near the mansion. One camera, positioned at a gas station 3 blocks away, captured the black SUV on the night of the murders. The timestamp, 8:52 p.m., 15 minutes before the security cameras at the mansion went dark. The SUV drove toward the mansion, then disappeared from view. It reappeared on the same camera at 10:01 p.m., driving in the opposite direction. 2 minutes before police arrived. Kareem had been in and out in just over an hour. Enough time to disable the security system, drug the wine, wait for the sedative to take effect, execute both victims, stage the scene, and vanish. But how did he get inside? The mansion's security system was sophisticated: biometric locks, motion sensors, camera coverage. Breaking in without triggering alarms should have been impossible. Unless someone gave him access. Alvarez investigated the household staff. A housekeeper who came 3 times a week. A gardener. A chef who prepared meals when Hamdan entertained guests. None of them had been at the mansion that night. All had alibis. But the chef, a man named Omar Rashid, had something interesting in his background: a cousin who worked for a security firm in Dubai. The same firm that had installed the mansion's security system. Alvarez couldn't prove it, but the connection was there. Kareem had inside information. He knew the system's vulnerabilities. He knew the layout of the house. He knew when the staff would be absent. This wasn't just a professional hit. It was a meticulously planned operation with resources and intelligence that only serious money could buy. And the motive? Protecting the network. Sheikh Hamdan's decision to cooperate with authorities threatened to expose not just the smuggling operation, but the powerful people who profited from it. Members of royal families. Wealthy collectors. Politicians who turned a blind eye in exchange for donations. If Hamden talked, the scandal would be international. Reputations would be destroyed. Criminal charges would follow. So they sent Kareem to make sure Hamden never talked. And Layla? She was collateral damage. She knew too much. She was too deeply involved. Leaving her alive meant leaving a witness. So Kareem eliminated them both and made it look like a tragic love affair gone wrong. The plan almost worked. If not for the toxicology reports revealing the sedative, investigators might have closed the case as a murder-suicide. The truth would have stayed buried. But now the truth was out. And Kareem knew it. By the time Alvarez issued the warrant, Kareem had already left the country. Customs records showed a private flight from a small airfield in Nevada to Mexico, then another flight to Istanbul. After that, the trail went cold. Kareem had vanished into the network of safe houses, fake identities, and offshore accounts that men like him maintained for exactly this kind of situation. Alvarez put out an international alert. Interpol added Kareem to their watch list. But everyone knew the reality: men like Kareem didn't get caught unless they made mistakes. And Kareem didn't make mistakes. The people who'd hired him stayed hidden. No evidence linked them directly to the crime. The shell company that owned the SUV dissolved. The security firm in Dubai denied any connection. The royal family in Dubai issued statements expressing shock and grief. Plausible deniability. The ultimate shield of the powerful. Alvarez closed the case with the truth documented in his report. Sheikh Hamdan al-Nahri and Layla Yusuf were murdered by a professional assassin hired to protect a criminal network and the interests of wealthy elites. But justice? That remained out of reach. And somewhere, in a city whose name we'll never know, Kareem Saleh continued his work, waiting for the next call from the next client with the next problem that needed solving. The deaths of Sheikh Hamdan and Layla sent shockwaves through multiple worlds, each reacting differently, each with their own version of the truth. In Beverly Hills, the mansion became infamous. Neighbors spoke in hushed tones about the murder house. Real estate agents knew the property's value had plummeted. Eventually, it was sold at a significant loss to an overseas investor who planned to demolish it and rebuild. The physical structure could be erased, but the story couldn't. In Dubai, the al-Nahri family moved quickly to control the narrative. They released a statement expressing profound grief over Sheikh Hamdan's tragic death and offered condolences to all those affected. The statement made no mention of smuggling, criminal networks, or assassination. Behind closed doors, the family reportedly conducted their own investigation, though no findings were ever made public. Some sources suggested they paid substantial sums to ensure certain details never reached the media. The Dubai government issued its own statement, condemning the violence and pledging full cooperation with U.S. authorities. But that cooperation had limits. When Alvarez requested interviews with individuals connected to the smuggling network, he was met with bureaucratic delays and diplomatic obstacles. The message was clear: some doors would remain closed. In Morocco, Layla's family faced a different kind of aftermath. Her mother and two younger siblings lived in a modest apartment in Casablanca. When news of Layla's death reached them, they were devastated, not just by the loss, but by the revelations about her life. They'd known she'd traveled, that she'd met wealthy people, that she'd sent money home. But they hadn't known the full extent of her involvement in criminal activities. Layla's mother gave one interview to a local journalist, her voice breaking as she spoke. She wanted a better life. She wanted to escape poverty. But I never imagined it would lead to this. I just want justice for my daughter. But justice never came. And shortly after the interview, the family stopped speaking publicly. Neighbors reported seeing unfamiliar cars outside their apartment. Layla's younger brother told a friend they'd received threats, subtle warnings to stay silent. The family retreated into silence, mourning privately, their grief compounded by fear. In the United States, federal agencies launched investigations into the smuggling network. The FBI, Homeland Security, and Customs worked together, using the evidence from Hamdan's laptops to trace the movement of stolen artifacts. Over the next 2 years, they made dozens of arrests, dealers, collectors, and facilitators who'd profited from the illegal trade. Millions of dollars in stolen cultural artifacts were recovered and returned to their countries of origin. It was a significant victory in the fight against antiquities smuggling. But the architects of the network, the wealthy elites who'd funded and protected the operation, remained untouched. Their names never appeared in court documents. Their involvement was shielded by layers of shell companies and intermediaries. Activist groups seized on the case as an example of systemic injustice. They highlighted how women like Layla, intelligent, ambitious, but born into poverty, were exploited by powerful men and criminal networks. They argued that Layla was both perpetrator and victim, trapped in a system that offered her no legitimate path to the life she desired. Protests were organized. Articles were written. Documentaries were pitched. But as with most stories, the public's attention eventually moved on. New scandals emerged. New tragedies captured headlines. The story of Sheikh Hamdan and Layla faded from the news cycle, remembered only by those directly affected and by investigators like Alvarez who'd seen the truth behind the headlines. Detective Alvarez retired 3 years after closing the case. In his final report, he made recommendations for an international task force dedicated to investigating crimes involving ultra-wealthy individuals and cross-border criminal networks. Some of those recommendations were implemented. Others were ignored. Alvarez gave one interview after his retirement, speaking candidly about the case: "We solved it. We know what happened and who did it. But knowing the truth and getting justice are two different things. When you're dealing with this level of wealth and power, the rules change. And that should terrify everyone." The mansion in Beverly Hills was eventually demolished. A new structure stands there now, modern, sleek, with no trace of the violence that occurred on that March evening. But the story lives on. In police academies, the case is studied as an example of sophisticated crime scene staging. In journalism schools, it's cited as a case of how wealth shields the guilty. In activist circles, it's invoked as evidence of systemic inequality. And in the shadows, in the world of fixers and facilitators, Kareem Saleh's name is spoken with a mixture of fear and respect, a reminder that some people are above the law, and some crimes will never be punished. So what do we take from this? What's the lesson buried in the blood and betrayal? Sheikh Hamdan al-Nahri had everything society tells us to value. Wealth. Status. Power. A name that opened doors. Yet none of it protected him. None of it saved him. Because here's the truth: when you build your life on secrets, when you operate in the shadows, when you cross lines that shouldn't be crossed, eventually, those choices catch up to you. Hamdan thought he could control his double life. He thought he could manage the risks. He thought that when things got dangerous, he could simply walk away, cooperate with authorities, and start fresh. He was wrong. And Layla? She thought she could climb out of poverty by any means necessary. She thought charm and intelligence would be enough to navigate the dangerous world she'd entered. She thought she could play the game without becoming a target. She was wrong too. Both of them believed they were players. Strategists. People who controlled their own destinies. But they were never players. They were pieces. Moved by forces more powerful than themselves. And when they became inconvenient, they were removed from the board. That's the reality of power. Real power doesn't announce itself. It doesn't show its face. It operates through intermediaries, through shell companies, through men like Kareem Saleh who do the work and disappear. Real power protects itself. Always. This case reveals something uncomfortable about the world we live in. There are two justice systems, one for ordinary people, and one for the ultra-wealthy. One where crimes are investigated and punished, and one where crimes are managed and buried. Sheikh Hamdan and Layla died because they threatened to expose that system. And the system responded the way it always does, by eliminating the threat and covering its tracks. Detective Alvarez solved the case. He documented the truth. But the people responsible, the ones who hired Karim, the ones who profited from the smuggling network, the ones who gave the order, they're still out there. Still wealthy. Still powerful. Still untouchable. And that should disturb you. It should make you question the facades you see every day. The glossy images of wealth and success. The stories of self-made billionaires and philanthropic royals. Because behind those facades, in the spaces we're not supposed to see, there are deals being made. If this story enlightened you, subscribe to this channel and drop a comment below to help others learn. Thanks for watching and stay tuned for more real-life inspired stories.